Hey, how's everyone doing? My name's Connor. Been acquainted with Toby, I'd say for about 2.5 weeks or so. Great guy. He's got a lot of great ideas. He's definitely a wet sponge. He's always open to learning something new. And I feel the same way about a lot of similar things. And that's probably the whole reason why I decided to join you here on today's episode.
Thank you. So our first topic in today's episode, we're going to talk about what dating is like in today's era versus what it was back in the day. Tell us your point of view about this.
So personally, I'm definitely an amateur when it comes to dating. I mean, I've been in about, I'd say, one platonic relationship when I was in elementary school. I mean, on paper, that probably won't count. I mean, I didn't really have any personal romantic feelings towards this girl, but we did have some chemistry with each other, so, there definitely was a camaraderie between me and her. But in all honesty, to answer your question, Toby, I just feel like the dating world these days, it doesn't undergo the traditional methods that me and you grew up to know, back in the 2010s or late 2000s. Everything's become more technologically advanced, where more people become acquainted with their future partners through dating apps rather than just meeting them in person, whether that's through a blind date, a casual interaction at the grocery store, or anything of that sort. So it's become a lot more unconventional, where people meet more of each other through online platforms like Tinder, Bumble, whatever. And because of that, there's a higher susceptibility of them to where they may get catfished, where the profile that user uploads may not actually be them. And it definitely opens the door to a lot of deception, to where people can't really discern whether or not the person that they're potentially meeting up with is authentic or not.
True, very true. And that's why I feel like dating has taken a negative turn in today's era, because everyone cares more about image, cloud, instead of personality, and what this person can bring to the table. And from what you said, it goes against what we were taught, when we grew up in the early 2000s, or even some people who were born in the 2010s. It doesn't matter. We were all taught dating is a two-way road. Everyone has to contribute something to the table. And dating is not about image or cloud. It's about if you have a good vibe about you, if you're really you sing great or even amazing, I'm going to date you. But if you're just you care about cloud, social media, and you have a very nasty attitude about life, and you don't take nothing serious, and what we're doing is just a joke, and what's the point? What are we doing?
Absolutely, it really just defeats the whole purpose. And something else too I wanted to mention is that there's definitely a lot of kids probably born within the early to mid 2010s that are about maybe 12, 11 years younger, maybe less than that. A lot of them probably were exposed to more luxuries than you were. For example, there's definitely a lot of kids born in the mid 2010s that probably the first thing they ever held before they were taught how to eat with their basic utensils was an iPad or any sort of mobile device like that. And back when me and you were younger, I was born in 2002.
I was born in 2003, so we were born in an era where social media and all that other shit didn't exist.
My parents had a VHS tape that was still running when I was younger. So as a toddler, a lot of the early media I watched was through those mediums alone.
I used to watch DVDs when I was a kid before the whole media platform skyrocketed. Even before the iPad era was even a thing. But yeah, man.
Yeah, there's definitely some nuances to it, and a lot of these younger kids, are more adept to it, where it's not so much of a niche compared to me and you. We can definitely catch on to where it can become second nature over time, but it's definitely not something that we would have initially grasped way back when. It would have taken some years to sort of grow and develop into knowing, and it won't click right away.
Yeah. Because I feel my generation is not perfect too. I'm a Gen Z, we're both Gen Z, so I can't say our generation is a great generation, because we've got a lot of flaws, man. We got a whole lot of flaws that I feel we can fix, but sometimes I feel the way our mindset about life, the way we think about things, I feel I don't know, man. Our generation thinks that life is really too sweet, but
And you should never take the little things for granted, because at the end of the day, we only have one life to live. And every decision you make, whether it's inherently good or bad, is always going to lead to a consequence. And you have to be cautious of what the gravity of those consequences may entail, to knowing that not just think before you act, but also think before you speak, and not feeling pressured to do something that would be against your own will.
Yeah, you're right, man. But I feel like our generation should learn, like, what it's like to just earn something, man. Like, see what I'm doing with this podcast, man. I'm not bullshitting my way through it, man. Like, I'm literally earning this shit every day. Like, I'm making the connections, I'm building trust. Like, I'm making people feel comfortable that, you know what, I'm not going to pressure you to do this, man. Like, it's your choice. And you want to know the best part about my podcast is that you can be yourself here, man. Like, bro, like, I keep telling my guests, like, don't hold back. Like, just say whatever it is that's in your mind, man. Like, I ain't going to criticize, I ain't going to judge, or just say what you need to say.
Because at the end of the day, it's an open space, and even if there's a conflict of interest where one guest's opinions may not align with your very own, at the end of the day, you got to learn how to compromise to agree to disagree, and accept them for who they are, and let them know that you're entitled to your opinion. I don't necessarily have to agree with it, but if that's the way you feel,
like, I don't have to agree
the floor is yours.
All of your opinions, but like, hey, if you agree with it, then that's what you, man. Like, I ain't gonna judge, I ain't gonna criticize. That's your opinion, so let you stand by it. But still, there's still a lot of people that think that, like, if someone has a different perspective on life, they have to, like, be argumentative about it. I'm like, I just don't like being argumentative with people. It's just draining. It's just a waste of energy and time. So, like, why do people, like, argue for, like, dumb reasons?
Yeah, and not just for petty reasons alone, but there's also a lot of arguments I see, not just on Instagram, Snapchat, or YouTube. Those are really my primary three social media platforms. I don't have TikTok or X or any of the other ones. But unanimously across the board, they argue about petty things, like, for example, like, who's the greatest quarterback of all time, or who's the greatest point guard of all time of this generation, and so on and so forth. So it gets intertwined with a lot of different topics like sports, politics, religion, you name it. Some, of course, being controversial from the other. But the point is that with the myriad of other topics you can discuss that may be more PG or or more friendly, you decide to go for something that's a little bit more abrasive and may lead to a backdoor of there being not just the aforementioned controversy, but for violence to run amok too. And that's just the type of negative energy that we don't need to promote.
Yeah. Also, another thing that really intrigues me is that it's social media, like, why people think just because if they get a lot of likes or they have, like, a big following on social media, like, they feel validated as an individual. Like, that's the one thing about social media that always bothers me, though, because there was a time where I even took a long break from social media. I took 4 to 5 years off social media. Because, like, I wanted to, like, understand who I was. I wanted to, like, learn myself as an individual. I wanted to grow as a person. I felt like just constantly scrolling through social media, just, like, worrying about, like, shit, like, why my life is not like this, and, like, why, like, I'm not at this point. That just really was, like, fucking with my head. So I just took a break from social media. Snapchat included.
Yeah, and to what you said, so another thing is that a lot of people seek validation for on social media is they want that instant gratification. So if they get that, they get that notification that says somebody liked their post, somebody followed them, or they got, I don't know, maybe like 10 likes on a YouTube comment, or whatever the case may be, it signals that surge of dopamine where all they can fixate their mind on is that single notification alone.
Single notification alone.
And they can't deviate it from anything else.
I just hate that.
And it's almost like as if their whole world depends on that. Like, that's what revolves around it. And the grand scheme of things, that's just a very infinitesimal way to focus all your attention on just that one singular notification when there's dozens of other things that you can be doing that could be productive, not just to your own self-worth, but also to the development or betterment of others that might need something substantial to build off of.
Yeah, I feel like life before social media was so better because you were outside, man. You was trying different shit. Like, you was just, like, testing your limits. Like, you weren't worried about likes. You saw this video on social media, like, you weren't worried about none of that at you're just enjoying like shit for yourself. You aren't worried about like the outside noise. I feel like social media is kind of like taking away that ability to enjoy life to the fullest potential.
No, 100%. It's just everyone wants to be cooped up in their own rooms, fall victim to the cabin fever, like a lot of us had to go through 5 years ago during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it's almost like as if they just don't want that vitamin D exposure. They don't want to go outside, get some sun, do something that would promote, more physical activity and not just, live a sedentary lifestyle of becoming a slave to your own device, becoming a victim to that vegetative state where all you can do is just doom scroll through TikTok, Instagram, whatever, for like 5 to 6 hours a day, and you're really killing brain cells rather than creating new ones. And to me, it's just a complete total waste of time. And not just that, a waste of space, and it's just absolutely unproductive that you spend more time scrolling through these said social media platforms than doing something productive that, like I said, not could just help you, but could also help better the lives of others, even communities or vast swaths of people out there that might need that help.
Yeah, you're right. That's what I'm saying, man. That I'm glad I was born in 2000, baby, because we was born in an era where, like, we had no choice but to go outside. If we were there when we couldn't do shit inside. Like, I was glad, like, I was born in that time before the whole social media era blew up. But yeah, man, like, I miss those days, though. Like, where we just enjoyed being outside for real, like, where we just enjoyed life, where we just enjoyed vibes, chilling with friends, hanging with family, even like bonding with cousins and even close cousins and family.
Absolutely, it helps to build that chemistry and build closer relationships with not just your friends or relatives, but to those out there that might need that support system where they need that shoulder to lean on or fall back. And, it's crazy, Toby, because within maybe the past 3 or 4 years, what became nuanced to me is if somebody wanted to link up with you, they would probably DM you or go on your Snapchat, and the first thing they would probably ask you is, hey, drop the Addy, or where's the ad, et cetera, et cetera. Like when I was 7 or 8 years old, when I used to live in Plano, the way we would link up is like whoever parked the Razor scooters and leave them up on the driveway the most, whenever you needed a big crowd of kids to invite to a play day, a party, or whatever the case may be. That's how everybody would link up, literally parking their bicycles or their scooters right in front of the foot of their driveway or their sidewalk, and everyone would congregate there. These days, we're more reliant upon social media to enable that, and us using it as a conduit to meet up with others, and not just doing it to where you have more of those friendly interactions face to face, not just through a rectangular screen that's glued 3 inches to your face.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, how we used to be able, like, back in the day was just like, just sending text messages, like, saying, like, what you up to, like, this weekend, like, what you doing, like, and then, like, you see, like, if you got plans, like, this weekend, like, just simple shit. Now, everyone gotta be fancy, everyone gotta, like, act like a celebrity or Hollywood, like, if they, like, blowing up on Insta, like, saying that, like, they'll say, like, yo, what's the move, like, today, or even, like, some shit like that, like, yo, we about to, like, go here, like, tonight, instead of asking, like, is you free or not? Just randomly, like, just asking for shit. I'm like, bro, our generation is fucked for it, bro.
It's shot through the roof. I mean,
I'm not gonna lie, our generation is really fucked.
Yeah, no. I mean, and also something else on a psychological level. There's definitely a huge fundamental part of there being an illusion to grandeur for a lot of social media users or personalities, influencers, whatever formality you want to address them as, where the only way they can feed their ego is if they have to constantly post something like 5 hours a day. Now that we have threads to where somebody can literally put a burning question, depending on like whatever is picking at their brain. Like say, for example, if it's something political or if it's something regarding a current phenomenon on social media, like a ongoing trend or fad, first thing they're going to post is, hey, has anybody participated in it, et cetera, et cetera. And then immediately once their phone starts blowing up with replies from different users that have caught wind of that comment, it's like all they can think about day in and day out. So going back to what I said earlier, more people have definitely built off full-time careers just by being social media personalities or influencers, and working a traditional 9-to-5 or a blue-collar job, like something that would put them within the confines of like a brick-and-mortar establishment. But instead, even though I can appreciate some of the nuances that technology has brought us through that admin alone, it's definitely become self-destructive for a lot of other different individuals to where, that's the only thing that they can really relegate their time to. And, if there's no monetary compensation or they're not gaining anything from it financially, what's the point of you constantly posting on there when there's no clear advantage of you doing that? When, you want to break the mold by doing something that would be less traditional in the eyes of others.
Yeah, and also I feel like social media has eliminated like that mindset of being like, originality and creativity. I mean, there's some artists that actually know how to be creative with social media and actually use it to promote like, their brand, their professional like careers. Whether you want to be an artist, whether you want to be a model, designer, graphic designer, like anything. But I feel like some people, 90% of people say they can say, well, like want to use social media to be famous. They want to use social media to like just try and blog and just be cool in society. Which defeats the point about like living your own life. I hate that like that word, even words that I don't like fuck with in today's generation is like the word aura, or just like just other shit like that, like aura. What's aura? Like this, it's basically like a glow. That's about it. It's going on, but like you just got the cloud, and it's like you just got like that feel about you.
It's like your whole presence or vibe or like whatever type of energy that resonates off of you that may catch the wind of others, like the fan in your vicinity. Like I guess by most standards, that's how we would define aura. Like what emanates off of you that creates that whole positive or negative energy that others would perceive you by. But in all honesty, like what you see on social media, like from these 3 to 5 second clips on Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, or like I said, whatever platform that you can think of across the board, is that their authentic self? And if you were to somehow, meet them in person through some type of function or like whatever type of event it is, like, the type of image that they present on their account, would that translate to real life to where it would either emulate it or it would be completely the opposite of where how they portray themselves online is in stark contrast to how they're in person. And that definitely opens the door to a lot of possibilities as to whether or not these people that are quote unquote or framing themselves
Or a farmer.
or that too.
Yeah.
If that's their authentic self and if they're being diligently honest and that's who they choose to that's what they choose to represent themselves as, or what they want themselves to be. They want themselves to be presented as to the vast majority.
Well, speaking about aura farming, a lot of people said to me that this year, like when you saw your podcast, how you was moving like this year, they was asking me like, "Are you aura farming?" And then like I didn't want to come off as like cocky or like an asshole. Like I wanted to say like, "Nah, I don't really give a shit about that." I just said like, "Yeah, I'm aura farming," but if I'm being honest with you, bro, I don't really give a fuck about aura farming. Like, what really, or it's just like this clean, like some certain things about yourself, like and like just basically just a glow up. That's all it is. Like, the difference is that or you gotta have cloud on the side. Like this Gen Z shit. I just don't fuck with it.
It just makes no sense. And there are some days where I feel like a young bloomer where like a lot of these terms that have become incorporated into our lexicon that have recently risen to relevancy, all of a sudden I'm like hearing it now. It might take me a minute or two for me to really process what the definition of that term is without me having to use the luxury of a search engine like Google to look it up to kind of get that insightful perspective in an encyclopedic tone as to what it means. But I mean, a lot of that I can just understand off the streets and create a clear distinction as to what it would be defined as. And a lot of it is just like kind of like what Toby said.
It's just silly, bro.
It's very nonsensical and just absolutely stupid or insipid. And it's just like I said, it's just a complete total waste of time, energy, and space. And why you're going to dedicate your however many minutes of time to that term alone, and then try to create your whole brand or identity off that term alone to create that traction for you, whether it's for the right or wrong reasons.
Yeah, I feel you, man. I feel you. And like just feel like our generation is just lacking in so many areas. And yeah, I just feel like our generation is just lacking in so many areas. Like, we just have a lot we need to improve on. Like, we have a long way to go. Because when our generation is naive enough to say that we're one of the elite generations, like that is so cap. That is so cap. Sure, we're probably the most talented generation, like in terms of skill and performance, but we're not the smartest. We're not the most knowledgeable generation. Like, I refuse to allow my generation to say that we're one of the best generations. We're actually not. Like, bro, I learned more from millennials than I do from my own generation, bro. That's crazy. A millennial in today, I learned more from a 30-year-old, a middle age, I learned more from a dude that's in his 30s or even in his mid-30s than a dude that's closer to my age, which is nuts, bro. I don't even learn. I learned a little bit from older generations, but they're just too old school. I learned more from millennials than I do from my own generation.
Yeah, and I'm not really that shocked either because I do share those same sentiments too with people that are in their 30s, mid to late 30s, pushing 40s, somewhere between that age bracket where I can definitely gain more insight, not just off of their own personal experience, but what that time period was like for them when they were around our age, and just grasping those contemporary aspects or nuances and how it really clicked to them than it did with the kids in our current age bracket and so on and so forth. And in all honesty, even though I can maybe take a few takeaways from maybe this topic or that topic that is trending with kids in my generation, it just, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really translate to anything massive than what it really is. And if I talk to somebody that may be 10 or 20 years older than me, not necessarily because they've got more experience because of their age alone. You should really factor that age as a number, nothing more than a mental state. But the point is, you can definitely garner more experience based off of what they've encountered in life, and incorporate that into your very own philosophy, and maybe build off of those tenets and what it is to have that moral compass and knowing what is right from wrong. Because at the end of the day, contrary to popular belief, age does not come with wisdom. You can definitely
experience comes with wisdom.
Exactly.
You gotta experience a lot of things to have wisdom. With me, I'm still learning myself as a man, but I've experienced quite a bit. I've experienced enough to know better for the future. I've experienced toxic friend groups, choosing the right people around you and knowing that anyone can betray you at any given moment, not just friends, but family included.
Oh, absolutely.
Family can absolutely betray you worse than friends. You just gotta be prepared for when that moment comes. But I just pray to God that moment doesn't come with my family, but with friends, it's inevitable. Anything can happen with friends. Y'all can lose touch, y'all can fall out, y'all can just not talk to each other for years. Anything can happen. Nothing is guaranteed with friendships. Or with family, nothing's also guaranteed with family too. You just gotta be ready for when that day comes. But hopefully, that day never comes. For y'all, just pray that day never comes. But anything is possible. Nothing is guaranteed in this life.
Yeah, nothing is set in stone or concrete. And to piggyback off what you said, so I think we've all heard the saying that you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family.
That's not true. You can choose your family.
Well, depending on who you connect with. But if we're talking from a genetic standpoint, if you're related to someone by blood,
you can't choose family if it's genetics.
Yeah, you can't separate yourself from that if it's on that particular level. But at the end of the day, there's also another common saying where families where it hurts the most. And I've experienced fallouts with different relatives in the past, and even if it was something unwarranted, whether it was on their behalf or mine, depending on who you want to play the blame game or point the finger to, it definitely results in a bigger gut punch than it would be with your best friend, even if you've known that said friend for an X amount of time, depending on what the duration is. It doesn't encapsulate the total magnitude compared to what it would be for a family member that you've known your entire life. And your it's a certain type of revelation that comes as a complete and total shock, where it creates this whole ripple effect that was unprecedented compared to what you've seen before. You know, it's definitely going to scar somebody a lot more than it would be with the falling out of a certain friend, because of how traumatizing that impact may be psychologically. And you know, and also something else too I've learned over the years is that when it comes to age is really more of a metric to how long you've been alive chronologically. One thing I like to say is that experience is the teacher of wisdom. You know, whatever topic or facet you have more experience in, you can build off of that wisdom where you can actually teach somebody else that may not be familiar with those concepts as to what you know from your vast disposal of knowledge. And depending if it has a positive or negative impact, depending on how it goes in distance, that's what can help you pay dividends in the long run. And you know, it can really prove to be beneficial not just for you, but for those on the receiving end who may want to gain something new out of it.
Yeah. But still, I'm still experiencing a lot of things like as I get older, as I grow in life. But right now, I'm just, you know, I haven't tapped into my full potential yet. I'm slowly scratching the surface, but I haven't tapped into my full potential yet. But believe me, when I do tap into my full potential, like, I promise I will do great things with it. I want to really, like, you know, test myself, like, you know, challenge myself every day. So in terms, that's why I love to, like, you know, test myself like every day, like when it comes to sports, exercise, and just like, you know, praying and just like, you know, talking and believing in myself like every day. I know those things can get exhausting, those things can get tiring, but we have to do those things, man. You gotta challenge yourself every day. You gotta always, like, you know, put yourself through that grind, bro. You gotta put yourself through that work so you can improve yourself as a man. And plus, you gotta go for a lot of things, man. You gotta go for a lot of things in this life.
You know, one thing I like to say is always be a better version of who you were yesterday. You know, become a better version of yourself, not just for today, but for tomorrow and for days to come.
Keep testing yourself every single day. And you test yourself like when it's convenient for you. Test yourself when things don't go your way. Test yourself when things aren't so convenient for you. That's the point of, like, you know, trying to improve yourself as a man. You gotta always, like, you know, compete, like, when things don't always go your way. You gotta always show up when things aren't always like go the way you want them to go. That's the thing, same thing with a job. Yeah, sure, I hate working here every day, but it pays the bills, it pays the money. So you gotta show up for days where you don't want to work here. You gotta always, like, you know, put your family first, because what if your family needs that money and they don't have the tools to provide for themselves? So you need to, like, you know, put yourself through that grind.
No, 100%. I totally agree with you, Toby. I mean, something else too I wanted to bring up as well, and this is a core tenet I'd like to adhere to, is never apologize for being yourself. Be your pure, authentic self at all times. You don't have to seek validation from others. You know, you don't have to seek anybody's approval as to who you are. If it dissatisfies them to where it leaves a sour taste in their mouth because it's not what they expected, or it's not something that they would choose or prefer from their own perspective and viewpoint, don't take that as a personal slight towards yourself and your very own self-worth. At the end of the day, your time is valuable, and if someone's not going to take anything beneficial to where they're really just going to take it for granted, depending on what it's worth, you know, don't put too much stock into it to where that's all you dwell and ruminate about day in and day out. Like, if that's something that's going to keep you up at night, then that's a very gnawing or corrosive thing to really think about, to let it feed into your mental. So, you know, if you want to really, you know, if you really want to be conscious about your mental health, you know, do something that gives you that sense of clarity that you gain euphoria or happiness from, and, you know, and build off of that and see where it takes you from there. Because another thing too I wanted to stress about too is not just physical health, but mental health. Because we've all heard the saying, health is wealth. And, you know, given the fact of what we experienced 5 years ago during the pandemic, that definitely was a huge turning point for me in terms of my mental health, as it opened so many doors that I was blind to all those years ago. And, you know, call it as you want, saying where it opened my third eye, but in a spiritual sense, it definitely helped me to see that clearly, where there was just so many facets that I wasn't akin to previously, that when the pandemic happened and I was struggling with that, you know, on a daily basis, it really opened so many doors of possibility that I just wasn't aware of before.
Yeah, same thing with COVID. Like, it opened so many doors for me, like mental wise. But I feel like maturity wise, I had to grow maturity wise over time in college. But during my COVID year was my junior year, but junior year and my senior year, like, really opened my eyes really well. Because it's like, it's a day where I just stopped being a kid. Even in college, I slowly like grew out of that kid mindset. But man, like, high school opened your eyes to like some real shit, bro. Some really disappointing shit and like some traumatizing shit. But really, bro, I don't think my parents understand how brutal high school can be, bro.
One of the biggest lies I was told during my high school years is that, all of this is temporary. You think your fellow classmates, your teachers, or any sort of faculty are giving you crap for whatever reason, whether or not, you struggle with peer pressure, you're making bad grades on your report card, you're not doing well on your test scores, whatever the case may be. The biggest lie I was taught, during that whole, tumultuous 4-year period that we all like to call high school is that it's going to get better in the real world. Like, once you graduate, once you walk down that aisle with that cap and gown on and you're handed your diploma, that, don't treat that as like an embellishment. Treat it as more of a trophy that's rewarding you for achieving that milestone as it is. And then once you walk out those doors, that's when you get that full exposure of the real world, and that's where all the stigma and all those burdens that you have to deal with over that course of time will be seemingly lifted off your shoulders.
No,
that in and of itself is a load of crap, and that's probably one of the biggest lies I was taught during my adolescence.
That's a load of crap. I mean, yes, you're gonna feel a lot lighter when you leave high school, but no, bro.
The real world
You're still gonna deal with a lot of shit in the real world.
The real world is 10 times more brutal than high school. That juvenile phase that we all went through.
Women are 1,000 times worse in the real world. Bosses are worse. Well, some bosses are actually pretty cool, but women are a hell of a lot worse in the real world than they are in high school. Shit, even like friend groups you're gonna make as an adult, they're gonna be worse. Because those friend groups can actually like cost you your life, cost you like, your freedom. Hell, if you do something stupid with your friends as an adult, that could cost you like, your status here in America, even if you're an immigrant.
And not only are they out there to sabotage you for who you really stand for, your very own personal identity. A lot of those friends are not as genuine as they present themselves out to be. And if anything, when it comes to meeting them for the first time, one thing I like to say is it's the first impression that always counts. And if they don't set a good precedent to where that first impression is either off kilter or it just seems a bit too imbalanced where it doesn't set the tone quite right, then that really should be a red herring or some foreshadowing for you where it's probably best to gauge your distance from that individual as they may be nothing more but a harbinger of destruction for yourself personally and maybe for others that are around them that may be either acquainted or who may have befriended them from prior interactions. And if you can get in touch with those people somehow or somewhat to where they may give you those clues as to you reading signs and seeing those as red flags, best to really, like I said, gauge your distance so that way you don't fall victim to those traits like they've been in the past. And sometimes it's always great to at least get that cautionary tale to not make those same mistakes, because there are times where those mistakes may prove costly and sometimes even at the expense of one's own life, which is something you can never get back.
Thank you everyone for listening to today's episode. We appreciate y'all, man. Thank you.
Thank you again. Yeah, because you want to know what they call it.